Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. Let me just share with you that Sujata Srinivasan is a healthcare journalist for National Public Radio's regional station in Connecticut's capital city of Hartford. As a senior health reporter, Sujata covers a myriad of topics, which include the politics of healthcare at the legislature, hospital transparency and accountability, workforce development, prescription and over-the-counter drug pricing and access, mental health and the opioid crisis, advances in treatment and care, socioeconomic determinants of health, and patient access and well-being, all through the lens of health equity. I first became acquainted with the journalistic quality of Sujata's writing in the fall of 2018 when I read her article, The Humanization of Medicine, a reflection on the quality and culture of healthcare provided at CMC. If you have not done so, I would encourage you to read this article, which can be found in the newsroom on our website. Sujata is also the author of the forthcoming book, Forged by Flame, a biology of Dr. Rachel Chacko, soon to be published by Zero Degree Publishing, located in Chennai, Tamil Nadu. Of note is that Dr. Rachel Chacko was a medical student at CMC Vellore in the early 1940s and among the first women to graduate from CMC with an MBBS degree. To my pleasant surprise, Sujata afforded me the privilege of writing the foreword to Forged by Flame. Sujata is the mother of a bright young boy by the name of Nikhil. She and her husband, Arun, are longtime New Englanders and currently live in Hartford, Connecticut. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Sujata Srinivasan.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. And thank you, Deepika, for making this possible, and Mabel and Dr. Anna for that beautiful prayer. I first became acquainted with the culture of CMC that drew me and kept this connection going for 5 years in 2018. And I believe that was the year, the 100 years since Dr. Ida Scudder decided to open a medical school for students. I knew nothing about Dr. Ida. I was there because my mother had been in a horrific road accident and she was taken to CMC. That was the closest hospital. My brother was also in the car, and so was my sister-in-law. And thankfully, even though my brother was admitted and my sister-in-law had bruises, and they both were emotionally, understandably shaken, and thankfully the driver of the car also walked without injuries. My mother was at CMC fighting for her life. She became a quadriplegic with several, she had several open fractures. And there was a time when I was hoping that we could bring her home and I could love her and take care of her and give her some joy. You know, we could as a family do that the end of her days, but that did not happen. And I was at CMC for close to 3 weeks in the ICU. You know, when people come there unexpectedly, you know, you never know what's going on at that point in their lives. You know, I was a young mother, mother of a young child, you know, with multiple stresses at the time. And this happened. And you know, and my child was with me, and then, you know, I planned, you know, family stepped in to take care of him and all of that. But while I was at CMC at the time, from the perspective of us as human beings, I think at a time like that, when someone you deeply love, you see them broken, and then you see them get into, you know, enter a coma, and you know, you're called at night to sign release forms, and you see horrific injuries on their bodies, and the machines beeping. It's not something that the average person is prepared for in their lives. And it was very gradual, but it was an inexplicable truth that I began to be supported by, when I thought I was alone there, I began to feel supported by the very doctors caring for my mother. And I have to, shout out a few names: Dr. Shoma Rao, Dr. Rajshekhar, Dr. Matthew Joseph, Dr. Joseph Tharyan. They were there with what I began to understand went beyond empathy, with a deep level of compassion. And my mother is attending intensive care anesthesiologist, Dr. Pritish John Karula. One day I was in the ICU, bare feet, and, he showed up with 2 chappals, and he said, "Here, wear these." And both as a health reporter and, as a daughter who'd cared for another parent, my father died of cancer, and I had been one of his caregivers. I had encountered doctors, and I still do every now and then, with the God complex. No offense to the doctors here, but the God complex. And to see this humility, of this doctor just dropped off the chappals and say, "Here, 2 left feet." And it made me smile at a moment where I was asking some of my closest friends, do you think I'd ever laugh again? Do you think I could ever feel happy again? So, and then while I was singing to my mother and holding her hand and telling her I loved her and thanking her for everything that she'd done for us, and then eventually letting her know that it's okay, that if she wanted to let go, she could, but if she wanted to come back, please do, because either way she would be loved and supported. If she came back, and if she decided that her life's purpose was over, then she should go in peace and with gratitude. So at that stage, I began to notice the others around me, the others in the ICU. And I started speaking with other women there, women with limited means. While I was waiting for my mother to come out of surgery, I saw so another woman sitting next to me who had come there for her brother. And she said, she's from West Bengal. And she said, we are people with limited means. And this is the 3rd time, or I don't remember the exact number of times, it's more than once, that she was bringing her brother for surgery. And she says, if we went somewhere else, they would have asked for more money. But here at CMC, every time we've come, we always go back with some money left in our pockets. So, we can go on and live our lives. And the care that was given to I think a farmer who had some sort of a rod through his leg, or through someone who was someone without economic means, recovering from alcohol use disorder. These were people lying on the outside on the grounds. These people were also treated with the basic dignity that every human being should afford every other human being, but easier said than done. And then when my mother died, I thought to myself, I lost my brother, my mother, and I was so grateful to walk out of there with my brother and my sister-in-law. And I said, I lost my mother, but I don't want to lose this nurturing that I received, and my mother received, and my family received, of being supported with such compassion at a time like this. It's something that I think all of us as humans would like to surround ourselves, as we go about our lives. And I said, I want to stay in touch with Pritish. And he's now a dear friend of mine. And I came to know that his grandmother is a doctor. Oh, okay. So, Dr. Rachel Chacko is Pritish's grandmother. That could explain, some of the culture that I see in these doctors. And as a journalist, I'm always curious about, how does institutional culture shape people who provide healthcare. How does family culture shape people who provide healthcare? And I said that could explain that his grandmother also went to CMC. So perhaps there's this cultural element that sort of runs in the family. Then I came to know, his father is a doctor, his mother is a doctor, also from CMC, served and retired from CMC. And a cousin is also, from CMC. And another cousin did her PhD at CMC. And I said, wait, there's a culture element here. And culture is something that without it, an institution is not what it is, but it's hard to quantify and it's very hard to cultivate and harder still to retain. So when I came to know about Dr. Rachel Charco's life, I said, I want to write about her and explore larger themes, including, let me take you to my screen. Her life in Forged by Flame. It's her biography and it's from 0 Degree Publishing. So those seeds were planted when I was at CMC, and this is something that I have tried to cultivate in myself too, to go beyond pity, to sympathy, to empathy, and empowered compassion. I'm here to help. What can I do? And it's quite striking that Dr. Ida Scudder, when she founded the medical school in the 1900s and then later formalized the MBBS education, where Dr. Rachel was the first all-women's batch in 1942, that compassion was the basis of medical education. Compassion is grossly undervalued in our society even today. Think about stay-at-home moms. I mean, how much do we value them, especially, from the point of view of gross domestic product? What about para teachers who are underpaid and who also don't feel seen, who don't feel heard? And about caregivers, long-term care facilities, a colleague of mine at Connecticut Public Radio just did a story about a protest from care workers in long-term care facility for disabled workers. Many of them earn about $17 an hour, and it's not enough to sustain a life. And so we really undervalue care even today, undervalue compassion, undervalue any field that we deem, as a touchy-feely thing. But that actually is the basis, not just of social well-being and the way healthcare is provided, but also to provide, to prevent physician burnout. Empathy may burn out. If you're always feeling what the other person is feeling, then you might burn out. But if you kind of transcend that to a level of compassion where you say, I feel what you feel, but you know what? I can cope with the way you feel, and I can actually go one step further. And I want to see how I can help you. So this are some of the photos that could explain what things were back then for women in medicine. This was when Ida started her first batch of MBBS students. And I had the honor and the joy and the privilege of interviewing that young woman standing up on the gate who calls herself the imp on the gate. She, Setu Bhaskaran, Dr. Setu Bhaskaran, she was a batchmate of Dr. Rachel's. And a lot of what I have in the book, I've spoken to about 100 people. I have secondary research, looked at Dr. Rachel's speeches, people that had interviewed her, life and times. And here she is. She played tennis in a sari. Setu says she was graceful like Roger Federer. And here she is. And this is when she met her husband. They had a beautiful romance at CMC, actually, where they met and married. And here she is with her tennis friends. When she built her, she and her husband, they built their home and her clinic downstairs. So what was it like for women back then? So 1940s India, laws affecting women in India, 1947. It was only 1947 when Rachel was graduating, the year that they allowed, that the CMC started enrolling men in the MBBS batch to meet the gender requirements at Madras University. Equal wages were provided for, provision of a childcare center to women workers. But Rachel, a mother of 4, chose to work in an honorary capacity so she could turn down transfers, frequent occurrence. So she worked as an honorary professor of pediatrics, and then she was the head of the department unit, Institute of Child Health. She was in charge of the postgraduates in her unit, lectured at Madras Medical College in the afternoon. And then it was a private practice at Wheatcroft Road. I mean, that house was sort of a landmark back then, and even now in Chennai. And guess what? She charged 15 rupees for her consultation, about 18 cents now. It was only in 1961 that the Dowry Prohibition Act came about. Now, Rachel's father-in-law refused to pay dowries. Now, most of his daughters were doctors. One was a celebrated anatomist and another was a surgeon. And he refused to pay on principle, saying, look, I've educated my daughters and they're going to earn an income for their husband's family. So I'm not going to pay dowry. And the same rule extended to his daughters-in-law. It was the 1961 Maternity Benefit Act. So employment rights of women during pregnancy. In a US-wide study, 35%, close to 36% reported maternal discrimination. Among those, close to 89.6% reported discrimination based on pregnancy or maternal leave. 48.4% said they faced discrimination based on breastfeeding. And it continues. I mean, women in medicine back then had to make choices like Dr. Rachel did, that she would accept a position on an honorary basis so she could avoid transfers. Even the house that was built for her, there was so much care by, on the part of her husband that it would be safe for her if were she to consult late into the night, that she wouldn't have to go out somewhere and then get back alone after her consultation, that she would be safe and he would know that she was safe downstairs, while he was taking care of the kids upstairs. Someone, support system upstairs, but his wife was safe downstairs. The children would come and go. Later on, the grandchildren came. She made time to play cricket with them between consultations, I was told. But the clinic was safe at home. So these were the criteria and the choices that were made by women and their families. Abortion was legalized in 1971, and in 76, the Equal Remuneration Act, equal pay for men and women employees. I understand from Dr. Anna Pulimot, who told me that pay parity is, their gender pay parity is there at CMC, but elsewhere we all know that's a different story. There's plenty of research that points otherwise. And one says women physicians on average in the US, on average, earn more than 2 million less than the US male physicians. And that's accounting for differences that could explain this wide gap in, such as hours worked, clinical revenue, practice type, specialty, and so on. So the disparity in pay. And sati was formally prohibited only in 1987, and child marriage also in 2006. So in my book, I talk about Setu's strategy in applying to medical college. There was no way, she said, that her father would let her study medicine. I also come from a family where I remember having conversations with my grandfather, medicine really was not the dissection of bodies, dead bodies, and being in environment. I mean, I remember my grandfather being very traditional. Almost, traditional, very traditional to the point where he would bathe 3 times a day to stay physically pure. And even if I went and hugged him, he would have to go wash, take another bath and come out. So there was this emphasis on physical cleanliness, and therefore it really didn't gel well. I mean, probably in my parents' time that changed, but in my grandparents' time, it was really not a profession that we even talked about. So Setu's strategy in applying to medical college was she didn't tell her dad. Somehow she found out that CMC was, opening the first batch for all women students, and she applied. But when she was accepted, her father sort of confiscated that offer letter, and he hid it from her. And Setu's brother-in-law found it, and he advocated, because of course, you're a son-in-law in the family, you have more voice than a daughter of the family. And so he advocated for her, and Setu ended up at CMC, and she played tennis with Dr. Chako. But it wasn't easy for Dr. Setu Bhaskaran. She realized, she recounted a story when she went to Chennai. All of them went to Madras to take their exams, and she recalls a male, and also for some classes, and she recalls the male professor telling her, and this is impossible, idioms are impossible to translate. He said, in Tamil language, "Adupu udara moonjikku medicine thevaya." So for a face that has been designed to blow into the cooking furnace, why is medicine required? And Dr. Rachel Chako was interviewed by Anne Wichels. I mean, I'm grateful, so grateful to Anne and to CMC, Dr. Rina George, for giving me access to the archives. So the class was accused of cheating the final exam in Chennai because all the female students from CMC had the correct answers. They were precise and beautifully articulated. So the male examiner goes, I mean, how? How could you, from women, from young women, from the country, side, unless you had copied from each other? I mean, how could your answers be so well articulated? All of it, all of your answers. And the women calmly explained that they had been taught by the outstanding Dr. Paul Brand, who had prepared them for the surgery exam. Now, Ida Scudder had received word ahead that not all students would pass. And Rachel tells Anne about Ida crying and praying, and the results were out the next day, and every single one of Ida's girls in the first MBBS batch had passed. Actually, Rachel earned 3 gold medals from Madras University, 1 for surgery, 1 for medicine, and also Ida's own medal for the best outgoing student at CMC. Now, in the course of writing the book, I interviewed family members of other doctors who were contemporaries of Dr. Rachel, and Dr. P.T. Madhavi Amma, quite legendary in Chennai, taught Dr. Sethu, I understand. And her daughter Lakshmi Rajagopalan told me when I interviewed her that the concept of a career woman was not there. Dr. Chako, after she graduated in the late 40s, during that time, Lakshmi's grandmother expected Madhavi Amma. So she said her grandmother expected Madhavi Amma, who had just completed the night shift, worked part of the day to come home and prepare snacks for an uncle who was coming back tired from work. And Madhavi Amma trained to be a physician. Patients preferred male internists because Lakshmi told me that at the time, men always knew best. So she became an OBGYN because back then women preferred women OBGYNs. Men also were not happy with what in their mindset were workaholic wives. So Dr. M. Thangaraj's grandson, Dr. Arjun Maduranayakam, shared some lovely experiences, stories from his grandmother's life. So when Dr. M. Thangaraj asked his wife, Dr. Florence Maduranayakam, to cut down her hours and devote more time at home, so this way he could focus on his work as a government doctor, Dr. Florence divorced him. I mean, it was unheard of in those times, but these were the choices that women were making. Dr. Rachel's struggles with male colleagues are also in my book. She kind of won around there, she kind of won them around with her pleasantness and with her non-confrontational way, and her faith. And it was a slow process. And her group of her female friendships, her circle of women, her faith, her prayer, all came into how she handled gender discrimination at work, undermining her work. And that's something that I've focused on as well. So Dr. Rachel Chako was born in 1922. She was born to a very pious parents. Her father-in-law allowed his daughters to not just study medicine, but to go anywhere in India or abroad. One went to Ceylon and to study in any university that they wanted to. And so they went to MMC, which was, men and women students. But Dr. Rachel's father, had a lot of conditions that she would only go to somewhere close by. Chennai was allowed. She would only go to an all-women's college, and also it had to be run by a missionary. So all that aligned when Ida launched her first MBBS program for women. So she navigated around that. And as Dr. Anna pointed out, I mean, she faced inexplicable personal tragedies. So she says, my experiences bear a close parallel to the description in Psalm 42, 6 of the Herman experiences, the valley experiences, and the ups and downs of life denoted by a small hill called Misa. Dr. Chako died October 28th, 2019. It's a beautiful photograph of hands that that have served all her 97 years. And she's left behind a tremendous legacy in her church circle, in the medical circle. I talk about all the influences of cultivating the next generation of doctors. She left behind a family of doctors, of physicians, and also instituted a prize in the name of her son, who was athletic, and it's for first-year medical school graduates at CMC. Thank you.
Well, Sujata, let me thank you. Really appreciate the intimacy of your storytelling and, sharing with us not just the story of Rachel Chaco, but of your family. So thank you very, very much.